Nightmare Crypt. True stories people weren't supposed to survive. If this ends abruptly, understand I didn't stop writing because I wanted to. I'm putting this here because I don't trust myself anymore. Not my memory, not my judgment, not even my senses. If you're listening to this on Nightmare Crypt, I need you to understand something first. This is not a story I polished or rewrote. This is a record, a confession, something I need outside of my own head before whatever is happening finishes tightening around me. I know how this sounds. I know how people like me usually sound. Paranoid, guilty, unstable. That's fine. You don't have to believe me. I just need you to listen long enough to recognize it if it happens to you. Because once you hear it, really hear it, you can't unhear it. There's a sound that follows me now. Not always loud, not always clear. Sometimes it's barely there, like pressure in the ears before a storm. Sometimes it's so strong I feel it in my teeth. It doesn't come from outside. It doesn't come from inside either. It's like it's embedded in the space around me, stitched into the air. I waited too long to say something. I kept thinking if I stayed calm, if I acted normal, it would stop. That it was stress, insomnia, guilt over nothing. That's what people tell you to think. That's how you learn to ignore warnings. Something irreversible happened, and I think it happened earlier than I realized. If you live alone, if you've ever noticed a sound in your house that doesn't belong to anything you own, don't do what I did. Don't convince yourself it's harmless. Don't tell yourself you're imagining patterns. And if you ever hear a heartbeat where there shouldn't be one, don't listen closer. I live in a duplex just outside Des Moines, Iowa. Nothing creepy on the surface. Quiet street, small lawns, mailboxes that lean a little from winter frost. You can hear the highway if the wind's right, and on weekends someone down the block always grills too late and plays country music too loud. I work IT support for a regional insurance company. Remote, screens all day, headset, password resets. I'm not someone who scares easily. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't even watch horror unless it's background noise. My life is routines stacked on routines. Coffee at 6:40, emails by 7, lunch at my desk, bed by midnight. That's why this bothers me so much. There was nothing dramatic about the beginning, no sudden shock, no moment I could point to and say, that's when it went wrong. The house has thin walls. I knew that when I moved in. You hear pipes, you hear the furnace kick on, you hear your own footsteps echo weirdly at night. Normal stuff. The first time I noticed the sound, I was brushing my teeth. I remember because I had foam in my mouth and my phone propped against the mirror playing some podcast I wasn't listening to. I paused because I thought I heard something through the walls. At first I thought it was my neighbor. Older guy, retired, always home, always quiet. The kind of person whose TV you hear late at night because nothing else makes noise. But this wasn't a TV. It was rhythmic, slow, muffled, like someone tapping a finger against fabric. I leaned closer to the sink, listening, toothpaste dripping down my chin, and the sound stopped. That should have been the end of it. Over the next few days, I noticed it again. Always when the house was otherwise silent. Always when I wasn't focusing on it. Sitting at my desk with my headset off. Lying in bed with the lights out. Standing in the kitchen, waiting for the microwave to finish. A dull, steady thump, thump, thump. Not loud, not threatening, just there. I told myself it was plumbing, expansion, some weird pressure thing I'd never paid attention to before. When you work from home, you start noticing noises you'd normally miss. That's what people say. I started catching myself holding my breath when it happened, like I didn't want to interrupt it. That part scares me now. The sound never synced with anything mechanical. Not the furnace, not the fridge, not the pipes. I tried timing it, counting. It wasn't consistent enough to be a machine, but it wasn't random either. It had a pace, a patience to it. I put my ear against the wall one night, the shared wall between my place and the neighbor's. 34 years old, pressed against drywall like a kid playing spy. The sound was clearer there, deeper. I knocked, lightly, just once. The sound stopped immediately. I waited, 10 seconds, 20, a full minute. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, and called out, "Hey, everything okay over there?" No answer. I told myself I'd ask him the next time I saw him, except I didn't see him anymore. Not at his mailbox, not in his yard. His car stayed parked, same spot, same layer of dust. No lights at night, no TV sounds. The heartbeat kept happening. That's the word I avoided using at first, heartbeat. Because once you think of it that way, you can't stop thinking of it that way. Every sound starts matching it. Your own pulse starts syncing up in uncomfortable ways. I started sleeping with a fan on, then white noise, then both. I started keeping the TV on all night just to fill the space. The sound didn't go away. It just sank under everything else, like it was willing to wait. I didn't tell anyone. That's important. Not my coworkers, not my sister, not even my therapist, who I see once a month and lie to professionally. I didn't tell anyone because some part of me knew the moment I said it out loud, it would become real in a way I couldn't undo. The night I really understood something was wrong, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. for no reason. No nightmare, no noise that jolted me awake, just that sudden cold alertness, like someone had flipped a switch behind my eyes. The house was silent, too silent, and under that silence, perfectly clear, coming from inside the wall, thump, 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 confident. I sat up in bed, heart racing, and the sound didn't change. It didn't care that I was listening. That's when I realized it wasn't just something happening near me. It was something aware of me. I lay there for a long time, staring at the dark, trying to decide if I was actually awake. I pinched my arm hard enough to hurt. The sound didn't falter. It didn't speed up or slow down. It just kept going, steady as a clock that didn't care what time it was. I got out of bed and stood barefoot on the cold floor. The carpet felt wrong under my feet, like I was standing on something that could feel me back. I told myself that was stupid. I told myself a lot of things were stupid. The sound was louder near the shared wall. I could feel it more than hear it. A faint vibration, like bass from a distant car, except there was no music, just that dull, wet rhythm. I pressed my palm flat against the drywall. Heat, movement, anything. The wall was cool, still. The heartbeat kept going. I backed away, slowly, like the wall might react if I moved too fast. I went into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were shaking so badly, I spilled half of it on the counter. I drank anyway. The water tasted like metal. I checked my phone. No notifications, no missed calls. 3:24 a.m. I stood there until the sound faded. Not stopped, faded, like it had moved deeper into the wall or farther away, or maybe just decided it had made its point. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch with all the lights on until the sun came up, watching dust float through the air like tiny, aimless things. In the morning, everything looked normal. Too normal. Sunlight through the blinds, the hum of the fridge, a car passing outside. The sound was gone, and without it, I almost felt foolish. Like I'd worked myself into a panic over nothing. That's how it gets you. It gives you daylight. I worked a full shift that day, took calls, solved problems, laughed at something a coworker said. Every now and then, I'd realize I was holding my breath, waiting for a sound that wasn't there. Around noon, I went outside to take the trash out. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Something sour and old, like damp cardboard and spoiled meat left too long in a hot car. It seemed strongest near the shared wall, right where the foundation met the ground. I stood there longer than I should have, trash bag in my hand, sniffing like an idiot. The smell wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't enough to raise alarms on its own. It was just wrong, out of place. I knocked on my neighbor's door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You good over there?" Nothing. I noticed then that the door frame had a thin crack running up one side, like the house had shifted. The paint around it was bubbled slightly, like it had been wet recently. I stepped back, looked at the windows, all covered. No movement, no sound. I told myself he was out of town, visiting family, in the hospital. Any explanation that didn't require me to do something. I went back inside, and locked my door. That night, the sound came back earlier. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up a ticket, when I felt it under my feet. Not loud enough to hear at first, just a pressure, like someone gently tapping the underside of the floor. I froze. The tapping grew more distinct, up the wall, into the air, until I could hear it clearly, even with my computer fan running. Thump, thump, thump. I ripped my headset off and stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "Stop," I said, out loud without thinking. The sound didn't stop. That was the first time I felt something like anger from it. Not directed at me exactly, just present. Like it had always been there and I was the one intruding by acknowledging it. I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't even put on shoes. I drove around for hours. Fast food parking lots, gas stations, anywhere with people and noise and light. The sound followed me. Not literally, I know how that sounds. It wasn't like I heard it in my car. It was worse than that. I felt it. Like my own heartbeat had been replaced with something slightly off-tempo. I kept checking my pulse at stoplights, pressing my fingers into my wrist until it hurt. My heart was fine. The wrongness wasn't coming from me. When I finally went back home, it was close to midnight. The house was quiet again. The smell was stronger. I didn't sleep in my bed. I slept on the couch with a lamp on and the TV muted but glowing. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, convinced I'd missed something. The next morning I called my landlord. I told him I thought there was an animal in the wall, a raccoon, a possum, something had died. I said it fast, like if I didn't I'd say the wrong thing. He sighed and said he'd send someone out sometime this week. I asked about my neighbor. There was a pause on the line. Too long. Which neighbor, he asked. The guy in the other unit, I said. The older one. I could hear papers shuffling. That unit's been vacant for months, he said. I laughed. I actually laughed, because that was easier than screaming. No, I said. That's not right. He's been there since I moved in. Are you sure, he asked, and there was something careful in his voice now. We haven't had a tenant there since April. It was January. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, staring at the shared wall. My mind scrambled for explanations. Squatter, mistake, wrong records, anything. That's when I heard it again. Not muffled this time. Clear, close, loud enough that I could feel it in my chest. Thump, thump, thump. The wall seemed to breathe with it. I pressed my hands over my ears. The sound didn't change. It wasn't traveling through air. It was traveling through me. I don't remember deciding to touch the wall again. I just know my hand was there. Fingers splayed, sweat slick on my palm. The drywall felt softer. Not wet, not broken, just thinner. Like it had been worn down from the inside. I pulled my hand back and saw a faint indentation, already fading. That's when panic hit. Real panic. The kind that makes your vision narrow and your thoughts scatter. I backed away until I hit the kitchen counter and almost fell. Okay, I said, breathing hard. Okay, okay. I grabbed a hammer from under the sink. I don't know why. Some instinct that said I needed something solid in my hand. The sound grew louder, faster, not frantic, anticipatory. I raised the hammer. I didn't hit the wall. I couldn't. Something about the rhythm had synced with my breathing, and breaking it felt like holding my breath underwater. Like if I disrupted it, something worse would happen. I stood there until my arm ached and my shoulder burned, hammer raised, listening to that impossible heartbeat. Eventually, it slowed, then it stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after that. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking emails. Time started to smear together in a way that made it hard to tell how long I'd been awake. The smell got worse. I stopped using the kitchen. I stopped going near the shared wall. I slept in short bursts and dreamed of knocking that never got answered. On the fourth night, or maybe the fifth, I heard something new. Breathing, not mine, shallow, wet, strained, coming from inside the wall. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, listening to it struggle. Every breath ended with a faint, clicking rattle, like something obstructed. I whispered, "I'm sorry," without knowing why. The breathing stopped. The heartbeat returned. Faster now, closer. I realized then that it wasn't just a sound anymore. It was communication, and whatever was on the other side of that wall knew I was listening. I didn't sleep at all after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was giving something permission, like the act of not watching was an invitation. So I stayed awake, pacing, sitting, standing, pressing my back to the farthest wall like distance still meant anything. Morning came again, gray, cold, wrong. The smell had turned thick. It coated the back of my throat. It clung to my clothes. I opened windows even though it was January, even though my hands went numb almost immediately. It just mixed with it, like trying to dilute poison with water. I called my sister. I didn't plan what to say. I just needed a voice that wasn't inside the house. She answered on the third ring, half asleep, annoyed. "What's wrong?" she asked. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Because how do you explain a heartbeat in a wall? How do you explain knowing something is there without knowing what it is? "I think something's wrong with my place," I said finally. Like, really wrong. There was a pause. Wrong how? I stared at the shared wall. It looked normal. Smooth, painted beige. No cracks, no stains, no sign of anything alive or dead behind it. "I don't know," I said, and that was the most honest thing I could have told her. She told me to come stay with her for a few days. Said I sounded exhausted. Said I needed sleep. Said maybe I was working too much. I almost agreed. Then I heard it again. Right on cue. Thump, thump, thump. My sister was still talking, but her voice faded under the sound. The rhythm filled my head until it was all I could focus on. "I can't," I said suddenly. "Can't what?" "I can't leave," I said, and the moment I said it, I knew it was true. Not because of responsibility or logistics, because something inside me knew that leaving wouldn't end it. It would just move it. "Why not?" she asked, now fully awake. I opened my mouth. The sound stopped. The silence that followed felt deliberate, like something waiting to hear what I'd say next. "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up before she could respond. I sat on the floor again. Same spot, same view. The hammer still leaned against the cabinet where I dropped it days ago. I hadn't touched it since. I realized then that the sound always stopped when someone else was involved, when I knocked on the wall, when I was on the phone. It didn't want witnesses. That thought settled in my chest and stayed there. By afternoon, the smell was unbearable. It wasn't just rot anymore. There was something sweet under it now, cloying and wrong. I gagged every time I breathed too deep. My eyes watered constantly. I grabbed a mask from a box I still had from COVID days and pulled it tight over my face. It barely helped. I stood in front of the shared wall for a long time, trying to work up the nerve. My hands shook. My legs felt hollow, like they might give out. "I'm not doing this," I told myself. "I'm not opening that wall." The heartbeat answered me. Faster. Louder. I pressed my forehead against the drywall. It was warm. That was the moment of paralyzing dread, the kind that doesn't make you scream or run. The kind that locks you in place because moving feels like the wrong choice no matter what direction you pick. Something was alive in there. Or something had been. And it was close enough now that the wall itself had started to change. I backed away again, breathing hard. My mind raced. Police, city inspector, fire department, anyone. But what would I say? There's a heartbeat in my wall. It stops when other people are around. It knows when I'm listening. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd look at me the way people look at someone they've already decided is unstable. And then they'd leave, and I'd still be here. The sound grew faster, not panicked, insistent, like it was urging me towards something. I grabbed the hammer. This time, I didn't hesitate. I swung. The first hit cracked the drywall with a sharp, brittle snap. The sound stopped instantly. I stood there, hammer raised, chest heaving, staring at the crack. Nothing happened. I hit it again and again. The wall broke open in jagged chunks, revealing darkness behind it. The smell hit me like a physical force. I gagged and stumbled back, ripping the mask off to vomit onto the floor. When I looked back, I wished I hadn't. There was a cavity behind the wall. Not big, just enough space between studs for something to fit. Something had fit. There were rags stuffed inside, old clothes, towels, all soaked through with something dark and dry and flaking. I could see a hint of skin between them, gray, pulled tight. I knew what it was before I saw it clearly. My brain tried to reject it, tried to blur the details, but the smell and the shape forced it into focus. It was a man, or what was left of one. One arm bent backward at a wrong angle. His mouth was open, jaw slack, teeth exposed. His eyes, I stopped breathing when I saw his eyes. They weren't empty. They were staring straight at me. I stumbled back, hit the counter, slid down onto the floor. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. I couldn't look away, even when my vision blurred with tears. This was the moment of pure panic, the kind that hijacks your body. My hands clawed at the floor, my legs kicked uselessly. I made sounds I didn't recognize as my own. "I didn't do this," I whispered. "I didn't do this." The words felt thin, fragile, like they might break if I said them too loud. The smell was overwhelming now. I could taste it. I dry heaved until my throat burned. That's when I noticed his chest. It was wrong, sunken, collapsed, except for one spot right over the heart. It was moving, barely, but unmistakably. Thump, thump, thump. I screamed. I scrambled backward until I hit the opposite wall, my spine slamming into it hard enough to knock the breath out of me. I pressed myself flat, like that might help. The sound filled the room now, not muffled, not distant, alive. I watched, frozen, as the movement under his chest grew more pronounced. The rags shifted, the skin twitched, and then slowly, his head tilted. Just a fraction. Enough. That was the moment I realized I wasn't in control. I hadn't been for a long time. Whatever this was, it had guided me here. Let me hear it, let me smell it, let me believe I was choosing to open that wall. I dropped the hammer and ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember opening the door. I just remember cold air slamming into my face, and the sound following me, echoing in my skull. I drove until my vision tunneled, until the world outside the windshield stopped feeling real. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot 2 towns over, sitting in my car with the engine off, shaking. The sound faded eventually. Not gone, just quieter, like it had settled somewhere deeper. I didn't go back to the house that night, or the next. I slept in my car, then cheap motels. I stopped checking messages, stopped answering calls. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen, because part of me knew something I didn't want to admit. It hadn't been trapped in the wall. The wall had been containing it. Now it knows I know. I'm writing this because the sound has started again. Not in a wall, inside my chest. It's slower than my heartbeat, off by just enough that I can tell the difference. It gets stronger when I'm alone, louder when it's quiet. Sometimes when I press my hand over my heart, I swear I feel 2 rhythms. If you hear this and recognize it, if there's a sound in your house you can't explain, a pattern you keep rationalizing, don't wait. Don't listen closer, don't open anything. Because once it moves, it doesn't need walls anymore.